Is the front of one of the drawers from a nice MCM dresser set. Unfortunately, this one, when the previous owner was moving the dresser, uh, pulled out of the dresser and fell onto the highway while the truck was moving. And most of the damage is here in the corner, but one of the poles was also destroyed in that impact. These are very unusual poles, or at least unusual from what I might have in stock. But fortunately, this dresser set came with a headboard and footboard set, and there were some poles on the sliding doors on the headboard that I can harvest to replace this one. Other than this damage, there's some scuffing that occurred along here. The other side is mostly intact. This side, there's some obvious delamination. Looks like there's some missing wood here. I'm not going to patch that because that missing wood is actually still in the dovetails on the side. The sides were both split. This one was split along this line and I glued it back together. The other one is similar. The back needed some repair as well to repair splits in the dovetails where the impact pulled it apart. And the bottom of the drawer is mostly intact, although you can see some glue residue here. And it turns out that the previous owner, after the damage, started to glue the drawer back together. And as you can see, the drawer front is curved, and unfortunately, when they started to glue it back together, they glued the curved edge of the bottom, the edge on the right here, into the back. And I had to use a heat gun and pull that apart, so we'll have to do some repair work there. Not sure exactly how far I'm going to have to go. I think the approach I'm going to take is going to be just to sort of gingerly cut progressively further and further down in until I get to some solid wood that I feel like I can glue to. There's likely to be some trial and error to this as I get back to something I can work with. I originally drew a line right about there, but I can see in the reflection, I'm sure you can't see it on camera, that there's kind of the face veneer ramps up. So there's certain to be damage behind that. So I'm gonna try to sort of work so that I just take that off, because I'd like to salvage as much of the drawer front as I can. So I'm going to try that. Cut along there. So I'm not going to cut very deep. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Pull off some of this material. Yeah, there's damage there. I imagine this was a pretty violent impact. I'm not sure how fast the truck was moving, but it did a number on the drawer, that's for sure. Let's try that and see what we got. So there's clearly not something we can work with there yet. This is all completely destroyed. I can go approximately corresponding to layers of the underlying plywood. Let's see where we are. Oh, there we go. Just in keeping with the layer theory. We're getting close to something we can work with there. Okay. I'll cut just a little bit more and take out this green layer here. All right, other than the small piece here, we're in pretty good shape. So I think what I'll do at this point is glue up this fairly obvious split here, or delamination, which actually goes back in a fair distance. It's pretty easy to pull up. I'll spread it with my artist's palette knife. Knife does a pretty good job of dragging the glue down in there. When it starts to drag and you're experiencing the glue kind of flowing as the knife moves in the groove, you know you have enough glue in there. It was dried overnight. I'll go ahead and unclamp it. Looks pretty good. Just have a little bit of squeeze out, which I'll clean up later when I clean it all up. I think the next thing to do is address this here. We have quite a bit of delamination and there's a missing corner, a layer of ply here. I'm going to have some repair work to do on the veneer, but I think I need to get this stabilized first. Like this. That may take some trimming. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a shot. Alright, so I'll go ahead and mark this piece. And I'll go ahead and cut that out and then clamp it up. It turns out that this extension piece is actually tapered. I should have noticed that on the other end, but it's so damaged that I wasn't able to see the taper until I tried to fit that piece of plywood. So I changed tactics and made a patch, which will of course need to be trimmed to fit, out of just a piece of maple. I'm going to have to put glue on several different layers here to get everything glued together since there was quite a bit of delamination due to the impact. Of course, this doesn't sit flat, kind of illustrates the point of it being tapered. There we go. Make sure that piece is in there tight. Off camera, I unclamped this end. Came out pretty good. and went ahead and did the same thing, glued up some of these plywood laminates on this end to try to clean some of that up. So let's unclamp it, see what we've got. It could have been tighter, but it is what it is at this point. So what I'm going to do, I found this oak plywood. I'm going to take the surface plies off. The reason I want to use this is because it'll match the plies to the best of my ability and get that look. So I'm going to go ahead and plane this down to 5/16 thickness and put a patch in, something like that. And 5/16 brings me to the bottom of that veneer layer. And although it's not going to be a lot of help, what I'm then going to do is come in and take maybe a 1/2 inch of this veneer off of the top. And then when I cut the new piece of veneer, have the new piece of veneer overlap the existing wood. And if you can imagine this being over here, go over the top of it to at least give it a bridge across the seam that is this sort of edge joint. I've set up my thickness planer. I've got a caliper set up to just a little over 5/16, which will give me a little bit of extra thickness to work with when I shape the front of that drawer. This is going to be just a little bit tricky to clamp because if you can picture this, I'll have glue here and on the edge. And clamping it here is pretty easy, but I want to be able to apply pressure normal to that joint because it's tight enough I can use wood glue. This angle here is almost 45 degrees, so I went ahead and set the bevel gauge to that angle. So what I'll do is I need to clamp this and leave myself a space to clamp across here. So let me go ahead and get this clamped in place. This doesn't have to be exactly the right angle, it just needs to be pretty close so that we don't cause any sliding here. Off camera, I went ahead and trimmed this block a little bit shorter. There's still going to be plenty of excess. I don't want to have to try to position it exactly because this thing may move a little bit when I clamp it, but working with a smaller piece is beneficial. Okay, I've got glue on the flat surface, the edge here, and the flat surface back here. So I'll start by getting it approximately in place. Come in and tighten this up now. This glue is good and dry. Go ahead and take the clamps off and see how good of a glue up it is. And it's good and tight up against the edge. I think the best indicator of if this is in the right orientation is really to, at any given distance from the center, lay a straight edge across it. And we're good there. Have just a tiny bit of a ridge here, but we have some material to remove anyway. And you got a tiny bit of a ridge right here. Some of that's glue. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this square corner first so we don't have as much material to deal with as we kind of mill this down and get it to the right level for the to apply veneer. And we'll kind of sneak up on it. We'll make sure we don't cut it too short. So I decided to use a pole saw. This is a relatively, it's not that tricky of a cut, but this is not vertical. This is normal, or a right angle to this surface. And since this is curved, this is actually canted a little bit. I'm not going to try to reproduce that. I'm going to, as I mentioned, I'm going to leave some material and then sand it to the right geometry. Turn it around on the bench. Now this surface, because there's no curvature in this direction, this actually is a vertical or a plumb surface. I'm still going to leave material though, so that I can sand it. There we go. So I have 150 grit aluminum oxide paper on here. I switched over to 120 grit, fresh piece of paper. I've got a little bit more material to remove here. And I'm generating a little bit more sanding dust than I thought I would. So I'm going to go ahead and put a mask on. Okay, I'm going to continue sanding this. So I'm at the point where I need to harvest some veneer. This is the footboard of that bedroom set, and the grain is about right and the color is about right to put on the corner of the drawer front that we've been rebuilding. So in order to harvest the veneer to reuse, using a technique I found where I basically put a wet towel, there's no water dripping on the floor, but it's been sitting there for a few minutes. I'm going to use an ordinary clothes iron. It's set on the highest setting. Going to sit it on there for 20 seconds or so, generate lots of steam, get it good and warm, and then okay. There we go. I like to get as much of this in one piece as I can, because I need a couple of long pieces and then the corner piece. All right, I was able to get the entire piece off more or less intact. I'll save this for another project at some point. So now what I'm going to do is start working on the drawer front again. The areas where we're going to need a veneer patch starts right in here. This looks more like just finish removed, but it actually slid along the highway, I believe, because there's a noticeable difference in thickness. There's a tapering there that I doubt if I can sand through. So I'll put a single veneer patch all the way down to, and it gets especially rough right in here, right down to the corner we patched. And then as I said, I'll take some of this wood away to leave space for veneer. I'll need a veneer patch here on this edge, which is where we had the corner was damaged and we had to glue it down, and then again on this corner. Okay, I trimmed this to a straight edge just by holding a steel rule carefully in place, then using a sharp X-Acto knife and cutting that edge away. So the next thing I'll do is mark a patch. So I can actually do that with this piece of tape here. Let's line that up with the edge. And use the standard procedure of using the edge of a pencil to mark that raised corner. And then I'll transfer this to a suitable piece of veneer and cut it out. It's a little bit difficult to see, but turns out this under layer of veneer here is pretty chewed up, probably from the impact. So basically the surface underneath there is tapered like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mill all this down a little bit in the same shape as the patch, and I'll put another patch underneath the finished face veneer patch, so we have something stable to glue it to. I glued up these patches last night. Let's unclamp them and see if it looks okay. Okay, this was just a veneer patch. This is just the tape I had holding it into place. And we lined it up. And then this is the tape that was the pattern. There we go. Oh, it looks good. Nice fit. Okay, I'll trim up this patch just to make it level with the side, and then put the veneer patch on the other side. The next thing I need to do is get this veneer, this damaged veneer off. So what I'm going to clamp this flexible ruler, flexible straight edge down, and just find where I want to put this, and then use that to guide my cut, so I have something to work against. Have to be a little careful clamping this since it's a curved piece. This is all pretty damaged in here, and there's no sense piecemealing it. It'd be harder to fit. So what I'll do is just use this X-Acto blade. Pretty easy to cut because it's basically a rip cut. We're going with the grain here. Not only is it pretty old, this part of the cabinet kind of had a rough go with coming out of the truck bed. Yeah, the grain's wanting to deviate from the cut. The cut's clearly all the way through the veneer. It's just the go. All right, it's time to start working on this corner a little bit. And in the previous work, I decided I was going to trim back some more of this veneer so that when we put the veneer patch in on the corner, it would overlap this seam. Found a technique that seems to be pulling this up quite well, holding the chisel level with a lot of down pressure, and then sort of working on a shearing motion from that line towards the edge. It pops right up. Okay, before I go too far, I want to scrape this. Just trying to get that excess glue residue off there. Okay, so now I have a thickness to work from, and I can bring this down to this level here, and then start figuring out how to taper it. Okay, I'll mark out this patch on the tape, and then find a spot on the veneer that I removed from the footboard that looks like the grain will match. So I want to make sure I mark the grain direction on here so I don't mess that up. And just mark this edge here. I'm not going to worry too much about the length, and I'm not going to worry about this here. What I'll do when I cut it is just make that a straight line, and then when I bring this piece in, I'll fit it to that. Turns out, you can see I mounted this on an angle. Turns out the grain on the drawer front actually is sweeping up. It's kind of got a little bit of a twist to it. So I drew these lines, which are sort of the direction of the actual grain in the detail on the drawer front. So I'm going to try a patch approximately with this amount of angle offset and see where we are. So I'm going to do that patch in place, and then just put our little hinge here. Move this over a little bit. Just hold it right in place. Then I'll get a brush and we'll glue this down. Okay. Okay, next I need to cut the strip, that long strip for the edge. And when the veneer's curved a little bit, and I need about a 3/8 inch wide piece. So I'm going to give this a shot, cut it out, and put it up against where we need to put it, see what happens. I put a new blade in my X-Acto knife here. It's hard for this not to follow the grain when the ruler isn't exactly parallel with the grain. I'll leave myself some extra material so I can straighten up the edge. Okay, got it cut out. Now this is the back. I'll lightly scrape, remove the old adhesive that held it down to this footboard in the first place. Flip it over, and I want to remove the finish if I can. Alright, I decided to straighten up the edge, the cut edge of the veneer just a little bit. So all I did was clamp it down to the original footboard with this nice sturdy piece of oak. I'm going to run my low angle block plane down the edge. Just overhangs just a slight amount. I'm not looking to take off a lot of material. I just want to make sure the edge is nice and straight. Okay, I moved this clamp block over a little bit to expose this corner, and then I fitted this piece of veneer that we've been working on. Now I'm going to clamp it down. What I found was this, I don't even know where it came from, it's a cheap piece of thin plywood. I put some packing tape over it. I'm going to use that as my clamp block to hold the veneer down. So I just need to put some liquid hide glue along our way here. Made this so it fits pretty tight, nice straight edge. And it mates up with the same angle we had over here. Got a damp paper towel, get rid of some of this excess glue. Make sure that's in there tight. I've got these mini quick grip clamps. They work really well in spots like this where you don't need a ton of force or a ton of area. I'll come back and put some more clamps on this. All right, it's time to take the clamps off and see how the patches look. Okay, that looks really good. I like the way that looks. We can work with that. Have a little bit of color matching to do. Overall, I'm very pleased with that. That should look really good compared to how this thing looked. Okay, I cleaned off that excess hide glue. There wasn't a whole lot, just with a paper towel and some water. To be extra cautious with this very long overhang here, I'm going to use a plane instead of a chisel. It'll take a little bit longer, but it's more controlled. Okay, it's getting close, but we have some glue residue down here that's going to be difficult to plane, so I'll handle that a little bit differently. Now that I have the bulk of the glue off this edge, rather than plane it, I decided I'm going to sand it, which will be a better mix of removing the excess glue and trimming that veneer to the edge. So let's see how that works. All right, now that I had the edge straightened out, next thing I want to do is remove all this finish. It's with as much patching as was done, it's going to be too hard to try to just do the patches. So I'm just going to strip this shellac off by using a carbide scraper. right, I'm ready to start sanding and see where we are with these patches. You'll notice I did another patch over here. It was just an additional damage spot that I needed to rectify. So I just have a thin rubber pad here, some 220 grit paper. Just trying to get the levels even between the old veneer and the new. Not wanting to take a whole lot of material off. Okay, I've sanded with 220, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but there is just a slight gap in spots. So I'm going to go over that with just a little bit of this walnut water-based wood filler. That'll dry quickly, and then we can sand it and see how. All right, the filler's had a chance to dry. I'll sand it with 220 and see what it looks like. Okay, that looks really good. Okay, I'm going to start the finishing process. I'm going to put a coat of seal-all, basically a thinned out shellac sanding sealer, on the surface to kind of see where our colors are going to land, and then we'll figure out how we're going to adjust the colors, if any color adjustments needed, which it probably will be. That color's not too bad. A little darker with the veneer that we put in place, but that's probably okay. Actually looks pretty good. All right, it's time to start assembling. So I've got the bottom cleaned up as best I could, sitting in the groove with no glue, of course. I've already pre-fit this. It's going to require some tapping to get it together because it was so beat up from the impact. So I've got some Tight Bond liquid hide glue here. Get the dovetails glued up. All right. Okay, got it in place, ready to start tapping these dovetails together. Okay, once I get them primarily in place, I'll sit it down and then we can clamp it up. Here we go. All right, looking pretty good. It's off just a little bit. We won't be able to check the front because the front is curved. Here we go. That's good. It's close. There we go. That's pretty good. Clamp the front and then we'll check it again. Pretty good. Just a little bit this way. All right, we'll let that dry. I'll wipe off some of this excess glue.